Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests.
Well, g'day. Fancy meeting you here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day. Welcome. If you have the absolute fortune to make this your very, very first time, your cherry popping experience with the defense rests, welcome and suffer in your jocks. If you've been here before, you know what you're in for, so suffer in your jocks. I'm Jodie. I am your hostess with the mostess today, and we are wrapping up the final day of the Chandler Halderson unaliving trial of both parents. It's an archive trial. It was the incident happened in 2021. The trial ran in 22, and we decided that we would have a bit of a play with an older trial. It was actually a request. So there you go. So today, the 29th of June. It's nearly tax time. Nearly. I like tax time. But mine's easy, so. Well, I hope everyone is well. I hope you're not all sweltering over there in the US at the moment with the heat waves going through. So stay cool, stay hydrated, and how about you just get yourself a nice, tall, icy cold drink and sit on your favourite comfy couch with the fan or the air conditioner on and tune on in and have a listen to Chandler Halderson. Let's get into it, shall we? Now, this is the best screen. This is the most informative. Come on. So I believe we've got closing arguments. And I don't think that, I couldn't find anywhere where the defense actually put on a case. Wasn't really, it's pretty much a no-brainer, but I like to play my little, actually, I will. Why? Because I can. That's why. So, I'm assuming. Oh, no, we've still got. I'll wait. Hold on to that thought.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll inquire of you whether anyone was exposed to any discussions about the case or engaged in discussions yourself with anyone, including yourselves, about the case, or did any research, looked up any information, or sought or was exposed to any media reporting about the case. I see no hands. Thank you so much. As a housekeeping matter, we have an exhibit numbered 1000. There have been stipulations about facts, which I've read to you during the course of the trial, and these have been reduced to writing and have been marked as an exhibit so that they're formally within the record in written form. And the state and the defense agreed that I should mark this as an exhibit and be received into evidence. Correct, Attorney Brown? Right. And Attorney Doral?
Yes.
It is received.
I really like this, Judge.
Attorney Brown, does the state wish to call a witness at this time?
No, at this time, the state rests its case.
Thank you. Attorney Doral, is the defense presenting testimony at this time?
The defense rests as well.
Then
All right. Well, they've said it. They've said it. They've said the words. That is compulsory. Good morning, Miss Tricia. How are you, my lovely? Are you staying cool today? I hope it's not too hot there. You got air conditioning at your place? Because I could not live without it. Alrighty. Now, day 9 is basically just the closing arguments and jury instructions. That's it. So, let's Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, the evidentiary portion of the trial is closed, and so should your notebooks. If you can close those up and set them on the floor. Once we have finished here in this room, those of you who are not in the end chosen as alternates can pick up the notebooks and take them with you to the deliberation room. Those of you who are chosen as alternates, when we go through that process, can leave them on the floor, and those will be collected and destroyed.
Leave them on the
I'm
floor.
going to start the process of closing out here in the courtroom by reading to you the final jury instructions. There's a number of pages, and some of this is familiar to you because I know you paid
Did you hear me yesterday, Tracy, when I said that the mushroom murder trial at here in Morwell, Melbourne, they started reading jury instructions on Wednesday, and they hope to be finished by Monday. I'm going to have to get a transcript of that.
attention when I read the preliminary jury instructions, and there is a degree of repetition.
I have no idea what
advise
they're
you
doing.
that in preliminarily instructing you, I did combine the counts so that instead of reading instructions for 8 counts, I read 4 with references to the 2 separate counts. I can't do that at this point. I need to instruct you on each and every count. So that part of these instructions is essentially double. The purpose of these instructions are to advise you of the law and your role in going forward into deliberations. And you will have these instructions with you when you deliberate in the event you need to reference or look up something that I read to you. So I always want people to know that. You don't have to listen to these thinking I have to remember each and every individual piece of this. You will have a reference point when you are deliberating. Members of the jury, the court will now instruct you upon the principles of law which you are to follow in considering the evidence and in reaching your verdict. It is your duty to follow all of these instructions, regardless of any opinion you may have about what the law is or ought to be. You must base your verdict on the law I give you in these instructions. Apply that law to the facts in the case, which have been properly proven by the evidence. Consider only the evidence received during this trial and the law as given to you by these instructions. And from these alone, guided by your soundest reason and best judgment, reach your verdict. If any member of the jury has an impression of my opinion as to whether the
There's a couple of things that I've got to do this weekend. Anyway, I've just put out the second half of the mushroom trial, and there is at least one more presentation I need to do because it didn't go to trial. But the case is still worth going over, so I'll do that as a case presentation video, not a live stream. I've got a few different ideas actually. I will I'll keep you up to date, but yeah, I might, if I can't think of anything else. I was thinking the Border Patrol Burgos, what's his name? Someone Burgos Alvarez or something like that. I can't remember his name. I've got the playlist. Or Gage's Child. I'll see. Have you heard of Gage's Child? It's called Gage's Child. Have you seen either of those?
Defendant is guilty or not guilty, disregard that impression entirely and decide the issues of fact solely as you view the evidence. You, the jury, are the sole judges of the facts, and the court is the judge of the law only. Evidence is, first, the sworn testimony of witnesses, both on direct and cross-examination, regardless of who called the witness. Second, the exhibits the court has received, whether or not an exhibit goes to the jury room. Third, any facts to which the lawyers have agreed or stipulated, or which the court has directed you to find. I remind you that in this case, the district attorney and the attorneys for the defendant have stipulated or agreed to the existence of certain facts, and you must accept these facts as conclusively proved. Exhibit 1000 is a written copy of those stipulated facts. Count 1 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did cause the death of Bart A. Halderson. Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is committed by one who causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant caused the death of Bart A. Halderson. Cause means that the defendant's act was a substantial factor in producing the death. Number two, the defendant acted with the intent to kill Bart A. Halderson. Intent to kill means that the defendant had the mental purpose to take the life of another human being or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being. While the law requires that the defendant acted with intent to kill, it does not require that the intent exists for any particular length of time before the act is committed. The act need not be brooded over, considered, or reflected upon for a week, a day, an hour, or even a minute. There need not be any appreciable time between the formation of the intent and the act. The intent to kill may be formed at any time before the act, including the instant before the act, and must continue to exist at the time of the act. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent to kill must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. Intent should not be confused with motive. While proof of intent is necessary to a conviction, proof of motive is not. Motive refers to a person's reason for doing something. While motive may be shown as a circumstance to aid in establishing the guilt of a defendant, the state is not required to prove motive on the part of a defendant in order to convict. Evidence of motive does not by itself establish guilt. You should give it the weight you believe it deserves under all of the circumstances. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to kill, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 2 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021, in Dane County, Wisconsin, did deliver written and or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the defendant had knowledge of the whereabouts or physical condition of a missing person, Bart A. Halderson, contrary to section 946.48 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means that the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 946.48 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who sends, delivers, and or causes to be transmitted to another any written or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the sender has knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant sent, delivered, or caused to be transmitted a written or oral communication to Dane County Sheriff's deputies. Number two, the defendant did so with the intent to induce a false belief that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson. This means that the defendant had the mental purpose to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Bart A. Halderson. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in the case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the two elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 3 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021, in Dane County, Wisconsin, did dismember the corpse of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Stat 940.11, sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 1 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who mutilates, disfigures, or dismembers a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant dismembered a corpse. Number two, the defendant dismembered a corpse with the intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 4 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chad M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did hide the corpse of Bart A. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Wistat section 940.11 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 2 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who hides or buries a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant hid a corpse. Number two, the defendant hid a corpse with intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 5 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did cause the death of Krista R. Halderson with intent to kill that person, contrary to Wistat section 940.01 sub 1 sub a. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. First-degree intentional homicide, as defined in section 940.01 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin, is committed by one who causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove, by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt, that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant caused the death of Krista R. Halderson. Cause means the defendant's act was a substantial factor in producing the death. 2, the defendant acted with the intent to kill Krista R. Halderson. Intent to kill means that the defendant had the mental purpose to take the life of another human being or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being. While the law requires that the defendant acted with intent to kill, it does not require that the intent exist for any particular length of time before the act is committed. The act need not be brooded over, considered, or reflected upon for a week, a day, an hour, or even a minute. There need not be any appreciable time between the formation of the intent and the act. The intent to kill may be formed at any time before the act, including the instant before the act, and must continue to exist at the time of the act. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. Intent should not be confused with motive. While proof of intent is necessary to a conviction, proof of motive is not. Motive refers to a person's reason for doing something. While motive may be shown as a circumstance to aid in establishing the guilt of a defendant, the state is not required to prove motive on the part of a defendant in order to convict. Evidence of motive does not by itself establish guilt. You should give it the weight you believe it deserves under all of the circumstances. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to kill, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 6 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did deliver written and or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the defendant had knowledge of the whereabouts or physical condition of a missing person, Krista R. Halderson, contrary to Wistat section 946.48 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of this offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 946.48 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who sends, delivers, and or causes to be transmitted to another any written or oral communication with intent to induce a false belief that the sender has knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant sent, delivered, or caused to be transmitted a written or oral communication to the Dane County Sheriff's Department deputies. Number two, the defendant did so with the intent to induce a false belief that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Krista R. Halderson. This means that the defendant had the mental purpose to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Krista R. Halderson, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause Dane County Sheriff deputies to believe that he had knowledge of the whereabouts of a missing person, specifically Krista R. Halderson. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the two elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 7 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did dismember the corpse of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Wistat section 940.11 sub 1. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 1 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who mutilates, disfigures, or dismembers a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant dismembered a corpse. Number two, the defendant dismembered a corpse with the intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. Count 8 of the amended information alleges that the above-named defendant, Chandler M. Halderson, on and or between July 1, 2021 and July 8, 2021 in Dane County, Wisconsin, did hide the corpse of Krista R. Halderson with the intent to conceal a crime, contrary to Wistat section 940.11, sub 2. To this charge, Chandler M. Halderson has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. Section 940.11 sub 2 of the Criminal Code of Wisconsin is violated by one who hides or buries a corpse with intent to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction for a crime. Before you may find the defendant guilty of this offense, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. Number one, the defendant hid a corpse. Number two, the defendant hid a corpse with intent to conceal a crime. This requires that the defendant acted with the purpose to conceal a crime. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent must be found, if found at all, from a defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances in this case bearing upon intent. If you are satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that both elements of this offense have been proved, you should find the defendant guilty. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. In reaching your verdicts, examine the evidence with care and caution. Act with judgment, reason, and prudence. Defendants are not required to prove their innocence. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of an offense to be innocent. This presumption requires a finding of not guilty unless, in your deliberations, you find it is overcome by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The burden of establishing every fact necessary to constitute guilt is upon the state. Before you can return a verdict of guilty, the evidence must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. If you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, you should do so and return a verdict of not guilty. The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given, arising from a fair and rational consideration of the evidence or lack of evidence. It means such a doubt as would cause a person of ordinary prudence to pause or hesitate when called upon to act in the most important affairs of life. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt which is based upon mere guesswork or speculation. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from fear to return a verdict of guilt is not a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of a decision. While it is your duty to give the defendant the benefit of every reasonable doubt, you are not to search for doubt. You are to decide whether the state has overcome the presumption of the defendant's innocence and proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. An amended information is nothing more than a written formal accusation against a defendant charging the commission of one or more criminal acts. You are not to consider it as evidence against the defendant in any way. It does not raise any inference of guilt. Disregard entirely any question that the court did not allow to be answered. Do not guess at what the witness's answer might have been. If the question itself suggested that certain information might be true, ignore the suggestion and do not consider it as evidence. Attorneys for each side have the right and the duty to object to what they consider are improper questions asked of witnesses and to the admission of other evidence which they believe is not properly admissible. You should not draw any conclusion from the fact an objection was made. By allowing testimony or other evidence to be received over the objection of counsel, the court is not indicating any opinion about the evidence. You jurors are the judges of the credibility of the witnesses and the weight of the evidence. An exhibit becomes evidence only when received by the court. An exhibit marked for identification and not received is not evidence. An exhibit received is evidence, whether or not it goes to the jury room. Remarks of the attorneys are not evidence. If the remarks suggested certain facts not in evidence, disregard that suggestion. The weight of evidence does not depend on the number of witnesses on each side. You may find that the testimony of one witness is entitled to greater weight than that of another witness or even of several other witnesses. It is not necessary that every fact be proved directly by a witness or an exhibit. A fact may be proved indirectly by circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence from which a jury may logically find other facts according to common knowledge and experience. Circumstantial evidence is not necessarily better or worse than direct evidence. Either type of evidence can prove a fact. Whether evidence is direct or circumstantial, it must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the offense before you may find the defendant guilty. Evidence has been presented relating to the defendant's conduct after the alleged crime was committed. Whether the evidence shows a consciousness of guilt and whether consciousness of guilt shows actual guilt are matters exclusively for you to decide. In weighing the evidence, you may take into account matters of your common knowledge and your observations and experience in the affairs of life. Ordinarily, a witness may testify only about facts. However, a witness with expertise in a particular field may give an opinion in that field. In determining the weight to give to this opinion, you should consider the qualifications and credibility of the witness, the facts upon which the opinion is based, and the reasons given for the opinion. Opinion evidence was received to help you reach a conclusion. However, you are not bound by any witness expert's opinion. It is the duty of the jury to scrutinize and to weigh the testimony of witnesses and to determine the effect of the evidence as a whole. You are the sole judges of the credibility, that is, the believability of the witnesses and of the weight to be given to their testimony. In determining the credibility of each witness and the weight you give the testimony of each witness, consider these factors: whether the witness has an interest or lack of interest in the result of the trial, the witness's conduct, appearance, and demeanor on the witness stand, the clearness or lack of clearness of the witness's recollections, the opportunity the witness had for observing and for knowing the matters the witness testified about, the reasonableness of the witness's testimony, the apparent intelligence of the witness, bias or prejudice, if any has been shown, possible motives for falsifying testimony, and all other facts and circumstances during the trial which tend either to support or to discredit the testimony. Then give to the testimony of each witness the weight you believe it should receive. There is no magic way for you to evaluate the testimony. Instead, you should use your common sense and experience. In everyday life, you determine for yourselves the reliability of things people say to you. You should do the same thing here. A defendant in a criminal case has the absolute constitutional right not to testify. The defendant's decision not to testify must not be considered by you in any way and must not influence your verdicts in any manner. Consider carefully the closing arguments of the attorneys, but their arguments and conclusions and opinions are not evidence. Draw your own conclusions from the evidence and decide upon your verdicts according to the evidence under these instructions given to you by the court. This time I will invite the state to present its closing argument.
Wow. I won't be a second. I'm just
HDMI left on, Your Honor.
saving this last stuff.
Okay. Good morning. I always start my closing arguments in the same way. And it's simply this. If any of the attorneys, either throughout the trial or during closings today, from either side, myself, Mr. Brown, or the defense, misstate a fact or evidence, you should go with your collective memories. You guys are the jury. We've sat with this case for months, had meetings about it, talked about it, read things about it, and sometimes not intentionally, but sometimes people, misremember something or think of one thing they read. So please use your collective memories as jurors to determine what you heard and what you saw. Additionally, it should be the written law that the judge just read and that you will get a copy of that should determine how you process and think of the law. For years, I've listened to attorneys where prosecutors have basically belittled the burden of proof and where the defense has built it up to be something that can never be overcome or could only be overcome by video. Neither of those things are true. You should look at the written law and follow the written law. Second thing I want to say is I want to apologize for all the graphic photos that you folks had to look at the last 3 weeks. I'm sorry I had to show them to you, but we had to. They were part of a crime, and because of the charges and what we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, it was necessary for you to look at some of those photos. I will promise, though, today I will not be showing you those anymore. There will be none of those photos in my closing. So every case that comes in is kind of like a puzzle. You have to look at it because obviously you weren't there, but solving a case and thinking about whether or not a person is guilty or not guilty is like putting together a puzzle. And it's your job as the jury to put that puzzle together. But the question in this case, or why this case is kind of unique, is the person who committed the crime.
What are you doing down there,
had
you
8 days to spread the pieces of that puzzle all over the state of Wisconsin, or at least southern Wisconsin.
Hey, Edith, how you going, sweetheart?
Now, what are the pieces of those puzzle? They're evidence. What is evidence? It's what you saw in this courtroom and what you heard in this courtroom, testimony. People sitting on the witness stand and telling you what they knew. Before we start off going through that evidence, I want to remind you of the background.
Hey, like I had this playing today whilst I was doing other stuff. And he is just lovely. He is so lovely. And it's really, really refreshing to see both the defense and the prosecution trying a case like they should. No bullshit, no trickery, just presenting the facts. That's it.
Of the events before July 1st of 2021. In June of 2021, Bart and Krista Halderson lived at 4595 Oak Spring Circle with their son, Chandler Halderson. And at that time in June, they thought that their son had an internship with American Family, although there was problems with the payment. He hadn't been working there about 6-7 months, hadn't been paid yet. They thought their son was attending MATC, that he had already earned a solar certificate there, and that he was enrolled in the IT program and was 1 class away from graduating. They also thought that he was going to soon be going to a job in Titusville, Florida at SpaceX. Now, things became a little suspicious to the father, Bart Halderson, who's an accountant. He's wondering, why is a Fortune 500 company not paying my son when he's working there? And for over a year, he was talking to various people at Madison College or MATC about why he hadn't gotten his son's transcripts, why they couldn't get a meeting, why he hadn't received his solar certificate. He'd been emailing with these 3 people, Aaron Hoover, Daniel Spieth, and Alyssa Brandt, and been communicating with them. This all kind of comes to a crescendo or to a head the day before Bart is murdered. And on that day, he has a phone call with Omar Job. He starts off this phone call, you can just tell in his voice, he's angry, because he thinks this college has been giving him and his son the runaround for about a year. They're not doing their job. And so he's kind of aggressive at the beginning of this call. You don't really like him until you know the whole story. And he learns during this call that his son has never earned a solar certificate, that his son is not enrolled in the IT program, that his son owes the college over $1,000, and that Alyssa Brandt, Aaron Hoover, and Daniel Spieth have never worked for Madison College. We see, and that is the background that lead us into the events of July 1st, 2021. On that day is started by Chandler messaging his girlfriend. 7:26 a.m., I hardly slept. 7:27 a.m., I don't know. Stuff really hasn't been going well for me lately. So I'm trying to plan for the next thing to fuck me over. We know at 7:27 a.m.
Well, I heard.
his mom leaves
Wah.
for work. She works customer service at Zimbrick. She heads to work. We then know at 7:51 a.m. Chandler messages his girlfriend. Yeah, I had a great future planned and it's falling apart. Now, what does he know at this point? His dad does send him a text message the day before saying, I spoke to Omar Job. I honestly don't know if that meant anything to Chandler or not. But things are coming to a crescendo.
Why didn't you ask?
And what
me?
we do know
Oh, you're the prosecution.
is he texts his girlfriend at 1:04 p.m. I overheard that they may go to the cabin with their friends, and I don't know. But I don't know. We also know that on Bart's work calendar, he has a meeting with Chandler and MATC. I don't know if Bart confronted him the night before. I don't know if Bart was going to see how long this ruse or how elaborate this ruse was going to get. But this topic was going to be discussed, and there would be a coming to terms. We know that at 2:10 p.m., Bart texts Chandler, I'm ready whenever you are. What happened next? Well, we have to look at the evidence. There's a spent shell casing in the basement of the home. There's a bullet fragment, noticeable reddish brown staining, also test positive for Bart's DNA. That's a bullet that went through and through Bart. The spent casing, and that casing tested positive as being shot from the rifle that belonged to Chandler. We know that Chandler got this rifle about 2 weeks prior, and it was found in the barn on Irwin Road. We know that he got it from his friend Smith, and he was given a bunch of ammo. We also see evidence in the basement of a divot from Ricochet, a fresh divot. Also, blood. A quadrillion times more likely to be Bart than any other unknown person. More blood. And we know that Chandler texted his mom this. Dad's phone died. Text or call me. Remember, Dad's phone had a charger right there on the desk. You can plug your phone in and within 10 seconds send a text message. I think here there's a half-truth. Dad's dead. Dad died. Oh, and get me soda on your way home. I have an extra hour of work.
Please.
We know Chandler didn't have a job. He's stalling. Get his mom to take more time. Okay, I can, she says, smiley face. We know that she returns to the house at 5:12 p.m. We also know that her blood is found in the basement as well. And at 5:11 p.m., Chandler starts writing the following note. Weekend chores, H2O2 and lemon. So that's hydrogen peroxide, which cleans up blood, and lemon, which is a deodorizer. Door handles, move your shit upstairs, get a job. Interesting, if he would have just gotten a job, he wouldn't have had to do the prior 3. And clean the floor. That came back in a search warrant for his Google account. We also know at 7:49 p.m., he's in the shower FaceTiming his girlfriend. So he cleans up. And then departs at 8:16 that night for Quit Trip. We see him there at the Quit Trip. There's the Volvo. There he is. He buys 20 pounds of ice. He arrives back home at 8:29 p.m. Then we know that somewhere between 8:30 and 9:30, the neighbor, Steve Greiber, smells a weird burning, a pungent burning that he describes like a pig roast. And you heard testimony from Fire Inspector Bill Boswell that unfortunately in his line of work, he's come across many burned bodies, human bodies, and that they do in fact smell like a pig roast.
No, they don't.
Moving on to Friday, July 2nd. We know throughout that night, and I'm not re-showing this video, but there's hours of this video. We know that we see burning in the fireplace and the garage light go on and off. All throughout the night. There it is, almost 3 a.m. Until at one point it kind of crescendos and dies down. We also know, looking at the living room of the Halderson home, that right there by the fireplace is a measuring tape. Folks, he measured the parts of the body.
Oh.
They were small enough to fit into the fireplace. Oh. And a fan, add oxygen to that fire, make it burn a little bit hotter. We know that it burned hot enough that it damaged the fireplace. The door shattered. and the paint is visibly peeling and bubbling. We also know that there's blood evidence. Evidence of cleanup from the luminol photos, as well as droplets of blood. We know that that those stains test positive for blood, and that they test positive for Bart and Krista's DNA. There is also some DNA from Chandler. He did cut his foot. We're not disputing that. But he cut his foot in the process of dismembering and blowing and burning his parents, not from playing ball with the dogs. More blood. That's also Dad. And of course, on top of this fireplace that then is made to look all pristine with papers that date to June 23rd, not in the winter from when you would have last actually had a real fire, but from June 23rd, there's a piece of skull. And so Dr. Cristina Figueroa Soto gets involved in this case. And she finds bones. She finds lots of bones. They go into this ash trap. I had never even heard of an ash trap before. Clearly, neither had Mr. Halderson. But they find a total of 230 bone fragments. She's able to say 106 of them were substantial enough that she's able to say what they were, that they were human and what parts of the body they're from. 53 from the skull or cranium, 18 from the hands, 24 teeth, 8 vertebrae, 3 long bones, either from arms or legs. There's also evidence in the garage. We have blood staining on shoes. That blood staining tests positive for both Bart and Krista and is identified as blood, not just touch DNA. More staining on the shoes, Bart. And in the shoes, they test the inside of the shoes as well to see whose shoes these belong to. They're Chandler's. They're his size 10 and a half. Oh, and he's wearing them right there. Those are the shoes he wore. In the garage, there's an axe found. And there's blood staining on this axe. It's positive for human blood on the hilt. It's positive for human blood on the head. On the head of the axe is both Bart and Krista's DNA. Oh. On the hilt is both Bart and Krista's DNA. Oh. And look at those numbers. A quadrillion times more likely to be those two than an unknown person. That's 1,000 times the world's population. And on the handle, Bart and Krista's DNA as well. We know at 7:02 a.m. that morning, that's a Friday morning of a holiday weekend, okay? July 3rd, Friday morning, a 23-year-old at 7:02 a.m. gets up, drives to Fleet Farm. Again, wearing those shoes. He buys a tarp. There's that tarp, 6x8. That tarp is later found in a trash bin at the Irwin Road property out in the woods. He returns home at 7:31. And we see the following, throughout the day, we see the following text messages between him and his girlfriend. We're set for this. We just need ice. And now hydrogen peroxide, because I stepped on glass. Later, there's more talk, whether she will come or not. But if your mom has an extra bottle, that'd be great. And a Swiffer wet jet. Okay, I do kind of, and there's more talk about whether or not Kat will be there and what time. And Chandler responds, okay, I do kind of need the Swiffer and the peroxide and stuff. Oh, and remember ice. Didn't he just buy 20 pounds of ice less than 12 hours earlier? But he needs more ice. What does he need that ice for? Well, the fireplace broke. We know there's a freezer. He bought lots of ice. And that freezer tested positive for human blood. Parts of his mom and his dad were put in that freezer.
Hey, Jenny. How are you, sweetheart?
We know that night on the 2nd, one of Krista's coworkers, Daniel Croninger, came to the house. He had heard that day that Krista no-called and no-showed for work, and that is not the Krista he knew. She had worked there for several years and had never done that before, just not the type of person she was. I mean, of course, I never met her, but she seems a little type A. Like she liked things to be in order, liked things to be a certain
Nothing wrong
way,
with
and was
that.
responsible. So he comes over, and Chandler begins to tell the tale of, yeah, they went up to the cabin. They left this morning with some mystery couple. You know, she probably just forgot to take off, even though her boss testified that she would often take off a year in advance and get the dates right and had dates planned out in the future. But Daniel seems to be somewhat satisfied with that. Here's the problem. Krista's phone is responding to towers in her house. She didn't go anywhere. She never left that house. There are cameras on every side of that house. We know when Krista went in, and we never see her leave. This is not a whodunit, folks. That house is surrounded by cameras. We know who came and left. And we know that her phone was found in a shoe, hidden under a shelf, behind other shoes, wrapped.
What's Sunday Funday? Is that another channel that does, like, you put in your suggestion and or whatever, and then they do that on the Sunday or something? Or I had a look at that guy as well. Ugh, ugh. Iced tea, Long Island iced tea, hopefully. Okay, cool. So they do that every Sunday, do they?
Wrapped in tinfoil, wrapped in a paper towel.
Oh.
Dan leaves about 10 minutes later after talking with Chandler. And Kat arrives and spends the night. And they spend the night on this couch fort. You probably thought, why are they putting in evidence about that? Who cares where they slept? This is why it's important. A normal bed, a queen size, is about 5 feet wide. 2 people can sleep there really comfortably and, for the most part, not disturb one another unless you're a rather light sleeper.
Wonder how hard that would
But
be.
Chandler has a problem. He has body parts in the basement of his home.
Like, I've got WhatsApp. Surely someone can call on WhatsApp and I can have it playing in audio. How does that shit work?
In the freezer. What if Kat gets a hankering for some ice cream and goes in there like she had before? He needs to be able to control her that night. He needs to be able to know if she wakes up and where she goes if she does. So he builds this, a thing that has walls where you really can't get in and out of it gracefully.
Look me up.
It's his way to know where she's at. I'm not sure if his girlfriend realizes how lucky she actually is. Saturday, July 3rd, 2021. Kat leaves at 6:55 a.m. She has a job. And we know at 7:47 a.m., Chandler is once again up and leaving the house, headed for Roxbury. How do we know that he's headed for Roxbury? His Snapchat shows him there. Kat kind of keeps track of Chandler's location, and they snap each other all the time. She finds him there. His phone also puts him there. And he's quite close to where the remains were found. We also know that is an area he frequented. That's a picture of him about a year before, standing there with a knife. And that white tent in the background, that's where they found Mom's legs. Dr. Rogalska performed the autopsy of the legs. And there's only certain things she can tell us from the limited amount of human body remaining that she was able to do an autopsy of. She can say that Krista Halderson was dismembered post-mortem, so after death. She also, looking at a totality of the circumstances, puts the cause of death as homicidal violence. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you if Krista was shot, strangled, stabbed, or something else. I can't. What I can tell you is we have 5 bullets missing from a magazine, and we know that Bart Halderson was shot 2 or 3 times. So there are 2 missing bullets, but I don't know if she was shot. What I do know is she entered the house, and it was only Bart and Chandler there. No one else. She died of homicidal violence. Manner of death, homicide. And those are legal documents that the ME has to put these determinations on. We know that Chandler arrives back home at 9:31 a.m. Later that day, he goes to Dulce's house, and he returns at 3:07 p.m. And that night, though, we know he leaves his house at 10:08 p.m. And we know he goes up to Portage along the Wisconsin River. From his house to Portage and back. He's up in the Portage area from at least 10:37 p.m. to 11:03 p.m. Portage is along the Wisconsin River. We tried to search that area. Wisconsin River has a very strong current. People drown there every year, and we never find their bodies, and their bodies are whole. They attempted a dive. It was unsafe. We didn't find any evidence there. But I think in the totality of the circumstances, that wasn't a nighttime trip to go swimming. We know he returns at 11:30 p.m.
No, that's going out on a limb there.
And then we go on to July 4th.
Sorry.
July 4th is actually the day that is the most eerie to me because it's like Chandler Halderson pushed pause on his crime and just lived a normal life for a day. On July 4th, he spends the day with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's family. He goes to the farm, uses the pool, eats dinner. They have some sort of barbecue. And he asks permission to return the next day and use the pool. On that day, he does do one thing concerning his crime. Oh, and then he goes to fireworks that night at Dan Croninger's house. He does send this text message that he says tells everyone is from his mom. And it is made from mom's phone, that again is in the house, in shoes, hiding in the garage. Made it safely. Can't get anything through. And yes, it's packed. Going to White Lake today for the parade. We'll be home Monday night or Tuesday early. Love you lots. Mom ended a lot of her text messages to Chandler. Love you lots. Couple problems with the text message. First, the parade was on Saturday, not Sunday. Second, the phone never leaves Windsor, Wisconsin. Monday, July 5th. We know that Kat had stayed over the night before, and she leaves at 7:47. We know that that day is supposedly Chandler's big doctor appointment at 2 p.m. We know that it's at a UW clinic on Park Street because there's conversation between Kat and Chandler about her potentially taking him, trying to get off of work, and she actually Googles the directions. Here's his text messages to her. Made it a bit ago and checked in. This is at 2:09. Just need you to know because I have horrible reception. 2:22. No connection to even load Snapchat. 2:24. And no Wi-Fi. 2:24. What UW clinic doesn't have Wi-Fi? They took an X-ray and CT scan. Nothing bad on the X-ray. CT scan, hun. They haven't determined anything, but with my legs, like they were, and I gotta wait to hear what they determined. Chandler never went to any doctor's appointment. He's at home, sending these text messages to his girlfriend, keeping up his ruse. Nowhere close to Madison, certainly not on Park Street. He does leave the house though that day. At 4:30 p.m., he goes to the farm. We know about that. He leaves a voicemail for Cress, and then him and Cress end up having an interaction. And there's this whole conversation about using the pool. We also hear from both Cress and Dulce that they went by the pool and there was no Chandler. So they take their little lawnmower. What did Dulce say? Granny's on a lawnmower. And they ride to where his car is. And the back is up, the trunk door, the hatch. And no Chandler. It's by the wood line. They see Chandler at some point kind of exit from the wood line. And indeed, his phone does have him there. And Cress is concerned enough. She thinks something's happening. I don't think she thought this, but she thought something was happening. So she asks the deputies to come take a look out in the woods there. So Brent Baverstock comes. He sees turkey vultures. He knows what he's about to find. He probably thinks he's going to find a whole body, but he knows what he's about to find. And there was Bart Halderson's torso. Dr. Breslauer did the autopsy of Bart's torso. She said he had at least 2 gunshot wounds, possibly 3. She couldn't tell because some of the deterioration of the muscle, whether or not it was like 1 wound tract or 2. So at least 2, but maybe 3. That he was shot in the back at least twice. That there was bullet material located in his body. And that 1 shot was a contact wound. The muzzle of the gun was touching his skin on the back. This wasn't a, oops, the gun went off. This is a, got you. You're dead. Cause of death, gunshot wounds. Manner of death, homicide. Can't shoot yourself in the back. So deputies begin to search this property. It's a vast property, maybe about 45 acres. A lot of it's prairie, a lot of it's woods. But they find this oil drum that has this weird cutout. And so they look in there and they find tools. And those tools then are tested by the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. The all-way handsaw has human blood identified as Bart and Krista. The broken saw blade has blood. It's Bart's. The scissors has blood, Bart and Krista's. And again, look at those numbers. 1,000 times the world's population. There's also some pruning shears. Again, tested positive for human blood, Bart and Krista. And the head had Bart. Some of these tools were then sent to Dr. Figueroa Soto. And she did a detailed analysis, and she sat and she talked a lot about, well, things I don't really understand. But here's the basics of what I understood and what her reports say. Is that this always saw has a certain number of teeth per inch. This broken handsaw has a certain number of teeth per inch. She can look microscopically at the wounds and tell us what tools are consistent with the markings that she saw. On Bart Halderson, his fourth cervical vertebrae is consistent with the broken handsaw. That's the tool that Chandler used to cut off his dad's head. And of course, that handsaw or that blade has DNA. Tools used to dismember Bart Halderson, the right humerus consistent with that all-way super saw, right femur consistent with the all-way super saw, and left femur consistent with the all-way super saw. That's that saw. Again, has Bart's DNA and blood. Analyst McMahon from the Wisconsin State Crime Lab also looked at some of these items found on the Irwin Road farm. She looked at that saw blade and she compared it to the saw handle found in the garage of the Halderson home. And she did what she does. She took some measurements, puts things precisely, and found that they were a match, that those items fit. She put together two puzzle pieces. An item from Irwin Road matched an item in the garage of the Halderson home. She also took a look at the tarp.
Who's that? Who just added me?
And there's a couple links back to the house with this garbage can. There's an extra lid to a garbage can up in that room that was, I think, at one time a bathroom and that they were remodeling. And there's also a matching sort of container in the garage. Inside of that container found on the farm is a piece of yellow duct tape. That duct tape had blood. That was Bart Halderson's. On that tarp inside of that trash bin, there's more yellow tape. More yellow tape.
Crap,
and there's yellow duct tape found at the house.
Holy crap.
So analyst McMahon pieced these together microscopically to see if they were a match. And she looked at them and found that they were all one continuous piece of tape. That's the tape he wrapped around the tarp to seal up his dad's torso. That torso also had Bart and Krista's DNA on it and tested positive for blood. Analyst Matson looked at some various items from the farm as well. She looked at that same tarp and found a fingerprint from Chandler. Now remember that tarp we have Chandler buying at Fleet Farm. It would have been bought and packaged with no fingerprints on it. Here we find it covered in blood with his fingerprint. She also looked at that tarp that was in that bin and looked at it for footwear impression analysis. Could she see some prints on it, and can we match those up to some shoes? Maybe that'll help us figure out who that is, who was on that tarp. She's able to match it up to Brooks 5 launch shoes. A pair of Brooks 5 launch shoes in a size 10.5 were found in the Halderson garage. Again, those are the same ones that have blood on them and that Chandler's wearing in that video. A second tarp was found in the barn. It is an older tarp. They tried to do footwear analysis on it, came back to a Ralph Polo shoe. We never found one of those. But again, that's an older tarp. We don't know if possibly it was before the homicides or after, or if there was a pair of shoes that were ditched somewhere. But that tarp, once again, is covered in blood that tests positive for both Bart and Krista. Now, you saw a picture of Bart working on that tarp. What you didn't see on that tarp was a bunch of blood stains because they weren't there. This blood is from this crime. Chandler gets home from the farm at 8:54 in the evening after going to the farm and later having dinner with Kat. But that night, he's not done. Early in the morning of the 6th, we see the fireplace burning more. Not as great as before, but some burning. We also see that garage light go on and off, on and off. I think it's a total of 7 times, Deputy Wilk. And that's throughout the night. And we know at 4:30 that morning, Chandler leaves and goes into Madison. We know he goes into Madison from his phone records. We don't know what he did there, but we do know it was a trip that started out in the dark. We know he didn't have a job. And we know Madison's surrounded by lakes. Use your common sense. Wednesday, July 7th. We know the Subaru departs at 9:36 and that Chandler goes to the farm. We know he goes to the farm from both his phone records, but also from this text exchange with Kat. Kat texts Chandler asking where he's going, and he replies, farm, but no one here, so leaving. We also know that out in the farm was found a Target bag that had been at Chandler's house. How do we know that? Because it has Kat's name on it from the pickup order of the stuff she brought over to Chandler's house, she testified about. That bag is full of bloody rags. We heard from Chris, those aren't from her house, and Catherine, that those aren't her rags. Chandler took a bag full of bloody rags, disposed of it at the farm, and a bag with Kat's name on it. And those tested positive for blood, but were not suitable for DNA testing. He comes back to his house after being at the farm, and he leaves and he goes and reports his parents missing at the police department. So he reports his parents missing. Later that evening, he has a couple visitors. There's close family friends, the Hilgendorfs, and there's two girls that are about the same age as the Halderson brothers, and they go over to try to comfort Chandler, because that's what Krista would want them to do, one of them testified. So that's what they were gonna do. They go over there, and through a series of events, Chandler starts giving them legal advice about police cooperation. You know, you don't have to turn your phone over to police. They don't have to image it. You can just take screenshots and text it to them. Your parents are allegedly missing. You just reported them to the police as missing, and you're encouraging people not to be fully cooperative with police? He then later has pizza that night with Mary Sesto and tells Mary Sesto, she starts saying, well, can't they just ping your parents' phones? Wouldn't that work? And he said, no, they can't ping a cell phone. She, disagrees with him. Yeah, you can. He's looked her in the eye, she testified, and coldly said, no, they can't. She was nervous enough of Chandler at that point that she testified that she put herself between the exit door and Chandler. At that point, she knew something had happened. She just didn't have the evidence to back it up yet. Just her gut feeling.
Oh.
On July 8th, Chandler goes around the neighborhood and questions neighbors concerning video footage.
Oh.
In all fairness, his uncle did recommend that he do this, but his uncle also said it's to preserve that evidence. If you watch those videos and listen to that audio, when people and his neighbors say, yeah, I turned it over to the police yesterday, he doesn't say, okay, thank you. He starts asking him questions. Does your camera pick up the road? Does it pick up my house? Does it pick up my driveway? He's not trying to help the investigation. He's trying to figure out, are the police on to me yet? He gives media interviews to 3 different stations. And as more and more squad cars arrive, he starts calling the police, asking, hey, what's up? Also that day, on July 8th, he does some Google searches. The timing of these searches is incredibly important, folks. Those searches happened at 9:44 and 9:45 a.m. Torso is not found until 3 p.m. Krista's legs are not found until a week later. And what is he Googling? Body found, Wisconsin. Women's body found, Wisconsin. Wisconsin dismembered body found. Dead body found, Wisconsin. I think it's interesting what he wasn't Googling. Jane Doe, John Doe in hospital in Wisconsin. Car crashes in northern Wisconsin. Crimes in White Lake, Wisconsin. Drownings on Sawyer Lake, where their cabin is. Or organizations that maybe can help start a manhunt. I think it's also worth noting he had 2 vehicles available, never even went looking for his parents. There's a reason. He knew where they were. He put them there. It's also worth noting that the analyst yesterday, Courtney Rip, testified that she didn't have any Google searches before.
I'm just going to go and get a magnesium tablet. Oh,
so that either means
my calf
that
is
Chandler never Googled anything for the entire time period of those search warrants, or he cleared his history every day.
I'll be back in a second.
On this day, he was arrested. He didn't have a chance to clear his history. So he's taken down to the station where he gives about an hour and a half, 2-hour interview, where he gives this same lie of this mystery couple of, taking lots of alcohol to the cabin, taking a large amount of cash, because, accountants love to keep large amounts of cash around. And at some point, Detective Hendrickson is like, we know you're lying. We know your parents are no longer here. Why don't you tell us the truth? And at that point, Chandler's arrested. So that's the evidence, folks. That's the pieces of the puzzle in this case. It's not a whodunit. Cameras all around. We know that Bart and Krista went into that home and never came out, at least as whole people. That their bodies were found dismembered, discarded, and hidden throughout the southern half of Wisconsin. That's what the evidence shows. We have experts from DNA, fracture matching, trace, footwear, fire inspector. We have bones in the ash trap. Chandler Halderson killed his parents. But I think it's very important to point out that Bart and Krista Halderson are not a puzzle. So it's a good metaphor. It's a helpful metaphor, perhaps, to look at evidence. But they are two people that were very much alive on June 30th of 2021. They are two people that deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. They were somebody's spouse, somebody's parents, somebody's brother, somebody's sister. They were loved by their neighbors. They had close friends. They had jobs. They were normal folks just trying to live a normal life. They don't even get to be buried next to each other. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm asking that you give justice to Krista and Bart Halderson, and that you treat them with the dignity and respect that their own son has never given them. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Raymond. Does anybody need a break, or can we go forward?
Actually, Judge, I'm going to ask for a 10-minute break.
Okay,
Thank you.
I could use a moment too. Ladies and gentlemen, we will break, mid-morning break actually, and we'll come back for the defense closing and further instructions and perhaps rebuttal arguments. So, Randy?
All rise for the jury.
On how our case is going to go. So you have an idea, as you're hearing all this evidence, how this case is going to go from both sides. From the beginning, we told you that this case was about the homicides. I listened to Attorney Brown's opening again this morning as I was getting ready, and there were some things that he noted that I think are important. First off, towards the end of his opening, he apologized for some things. Essentially, he apologized for doing his job. He said it might be repetitive, it might be boring at times, but he needs to do it because he has a constitutional obligation to present their case and they only have one time. And that's fair. So now it's my turn to apologize. I am going to apologize for doing my job. First, let me talk about my job. A lot of people think my job is to, quote unquote, get the defendant off on their charges, to object to every single question that's asked, to ask any question I possibly can of witnesses, to be loud, obnoxious, and make a scene so that I can try to get this person off of their charges. It's not. My job is to make sure that they do their job. My job is to make sure that if they're bringing charges on someone, they're doing it because they can do it beyond a reasonable doubt. They can prove those charges beyond a reasonable doubt. And people don't like when I say those words, beyond a reasonable doubt, because it almost feels like a cop-out. And if you think that it's a cop-out, well, then your issue is not with me. Your issue is not with Chandler. Your issue is with the US Constitution that says that without them, you don't have me. And without me, you don't have them. My job is to make sure that the state, with all of its powers, look, they even have more tables than we do, that they do their job. And I'm going to do that job today. There's a couple things that I want to address before I go any further down the evidence. The first thing I want to address is sort of the obvious. Chandler lies. He told a lot of lies. Not only does he lie, but he goes to extreme lengths, if you will, to keep those lies going, or to perhaps cover up those lies. I guarantee you, every single person in this room has told a lie, has either covered up that lie, or has done something to keep that lie going. Maybe not now, maybe when you were a teenager, go back to high school. I'm sure you lied to your parents all the time. You're not on trial, so your lies are not exaggerated and highlighted right now. But they are here. And the important part is that Chandler is not charged with lying to his girlfriend or to his parents. There's one charge that has to deal, one per parent, that has to deal with lying. Everything else is something that the state told you to try to feed you a theory, a motive, and to essentially taint your view on Chandler. So when we were going over jury selection, I asked you, how would you feel if you didn't testify? And a couple people said I wouldn't need to hear from him. A couple people said that they would treat him the same way they would do every witness. Bullshit. He lies, and they did a great job of making it known that he lies. If he testified, you were not going to believe anything he said. I also said that it was a game day decision, and most of the times it is a game day decision. This never was. If you heard from him, were you even going to believe him? You weren't, and that's fine, because it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, there's only one lie that really does matter, and that's the one that he said about his parents missing. I'm going to make your life a little easier, and it's going to be a little unconventional. There are certain charges that I believe the state has met their burden, and they have proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. And again, from the beginning, first-degree intentional homicide is a serious charge. We've been here for the homicides. A piece of paper that is signed, a formal piece of paper that's signed by Chandler to the Dane County Sheriff's Office about a missing persons that clearly is not true, this is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And I want you to think about that when it comes to talking about these homicides. I also want you to think about another thing. I made a weird noise, I apologize. But I want you to think about another thing. When Attorney Raymond did her closing, two phrases, if you will, really caught on. Several times she said, we know X, Y, and Z happened. We know that this happened. Pay attention to the times where she said, we don't know. We don't know. I can't tell you how she was killed. We don't know. Whatever. And it was always in the parts that had to do with the homicides. When I was in law school, I was told that the words I don't know should never come from that table. Because you should know. If you're charging people with crimes, you should know. So now I'm going to walk you through the evidence that I think that they skipped over that matters for me in proving that first-degree intentional homicide was not something that they met their burden on. I first want to talk about the cabin. There is a cabin. There's no disputing that. Bart and Krista went to the cabin at least 2 or 3 times a year, I think is what someone testified to. It's possible that they could have gone to the cabin that weekend. In fact, you don't even know what their weekend plans were. Friends testified. None of them said, oh, they were going to come over to watch fireworks with us. So no one knew what their plans were that weekend. The reason they're making a big deal about it is because that is some kind of premeditation to them. That is some kind of intent. Ooh, he was going to do something that day. He knew he was going to do something that day, so he was going to say something about going to the cabin. He's talking to his girlfriend days before, on the 30th, so a day before. There's a text message exchange between Kat and Chandler where Kat asks, we're not going to the cabin, right? And he says no. You're allowed to use your common sense. When you have conversations with significant others and you're texting, you're not going to get the full story because sometimes you do it in person. What we know from him and his girlfriend is that they chatted on Snapchat. They chatted everywhere they could. So you're not going to get the full story from text messages. But what you do know is that at some point, talks about going to this cabin as a family were happening. So this notion that the idea of going to the cabin was last minute because he needed to cover up these homicides that he was going to do is not true. Now, again with the lies, certain lies mattered, certain lies did not. What I want to clear up, and Attorney Raymond did a great job when she mentioned that we've seen this case multiple times, we've dealt with this case, we've talked to each other about this case, so sometimes we get things wrong. I'm going to clear up something that they got wrong. The evidence does not show that Bart and Krista knew about this SpaceX job. You heard from Kat's mother, Dulce, that she knew about it. You heard about Cress knew about it. Kat talked about it. maybe another friend or a roommate talked about it, but you never heard anyone testify that Bart and Krista knew about the SpaceX job. You heard from Bart's brother, Brett. I do not believe he mentioned it at all. So that's not a lie on this house of cards that was crashing down that Bart and Krista knew about. You also didn't hear that they knew about the scuba team, dive team, whatever you want to call it, lie with the City of Madison Police Department. You heard it from his girlfriends, ex's girlfriends and Kat. You heard it from his friends. But you didn't hear it from people that knew Bart and Krista and said that they mentioned it. And even then, all of these lies, what does it matter? So I want to talk about the two lies that the state really honed in on. And boy, did they do a great job talking about these lies and making it seem like it really was a big deal. Let's talk about MATC. First of all, yesterday, I think we heard from an official person from MATC that said no record that he attended school during this time. Detective Shunk showed us transcripts. You saw all his grades. He did attend at some point. That was really all you needed. You did not need to have the email conversations. You did not need to have the text conversations. You didn't need any of that, but they provided it to you, even though it's not an element or a charge that they have to prove. During their opening and throughout the case, they made a big deal about this email. It was an email between Bart and Krista. First of all, the email happened October 10th, 2020. The jig was up a long time ago. It didn't all of a sudden crash and burn on the 1st of July, 2021. And Bart knew. He was onto it. He says he sounds just like Chaz on the phone. Use your common sense. These email exchanges are from people with a .gmail.com address. Official school people using a .gmail.com address. Both Bart and Krista are college educated. You want to tell me that they honestly thought that this was legit? Or maybe they knew that their child was lying and they were just going to carry on the lie. Same with AmFam. And I use AmFam colloquially, but American Family Insurance. Again, there was a person that testified yesterday that Chandler never worked there, but he still had emails, he still had text messages, he still had this and that confirming that he lied, even though one person could have done that. And again, it's not an element that they needed to prove. It's not a charge that they needed to prove. They just wanted you to know that he's a liar. And what does it matter? Here's what you need to ask yourself. What does it matter? Because according to them, that's motive. That's the reason why he did what he did. This house of cards built of lies was crashing down and he had nothing. He couldn't do anything, but he had to murder these people. Why? Why? You don't know why. You were never told that they were going to kick him out of the house. You were never told that they were going to disown him. You were never told anything about why it matters. If this is going to be motive, if this is the reason you're intentionally killing someone, it better matter. There better be consequences. Kids lie to their parents all the time. And you just don't know how this was going to affect Chandler. He's complaining to his girlfriend the morning of about everything.
Hello, welcome, Montana Lou.
You do that. That's what significant others are for.
Welcome, welcome.
You honestly think that he's complaining about things crashing down and his mind is going straight to, well, now I'm just going to murder them. There was another motive that was mentioned very briefly, but it was mentioned, so I'll talk about it. When Mitchell testified, the very last question was about a life insurance policy. And I believe he said that the payout may have been about $1 million. And he acted confused. He didn't really know about it. It could very well be that the only reason he knows that number, that value, is because of things that are happening now. I don't doubt that kids know about parents having life insurance policies. I don't doubt that. But ask yourself this, does everyone know how much the policy is worth? Probably not. Do you think you're going to get $1 million from your parents? Probably not. And there was no evidence that was provided to show that Chandler knew that there was a policy in place and he knew the value, knew enough of that value to do something very drastic to get that money. There was no evidence that he needed money. Yes, he didn't have a job, but nothing came out that he needed money. And I'm spending time talking about a motive because, as the judge said, they don't need to prove a motive. Motive does not mean intent, and I need you to understand that. Motive does not mean intent. The other important part that I want to focus on is this timeline. If you go back to the opening, the state said that from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on the 1st, the killings occurred. Again, it's not evidence, but it is a roadmap, and it is important because that's how they're going to tailor their case throughout. Well, first of all, Krista didn't get home until after 5 o'clock, roughly around 5:12. They made a big deal about this MATC meeting. MATC with Chaz, MATC. You don't know if that was in person. You don't know what it's about other than MATC. You don't know if it was just a conversation that they were going to have. You don't know if it's a follow-up. You don't know anything about it other than some kind of MATC chat was going to happen between Bart and Chandler. And that was going to happen at 3 o'clock. I don't know about you, but my meetings never run on time. The other important part with this timeline is what we heard yesterday from Bart's employer. We asked him about that spreadsheet that has these logins. I remember the logins were in Eastern time. So what we said, what we were able to get out is that roughly from about 4:13, there was a login. What do we know about that login? We know that it's required, a password is required. We also know that, like a lot of dads, people keep their passwords in a place where they can remember them. We also know that the logins, that there was a certain amount of logins that you were able to do before you were booted out. We also know that that person tried these passwords, couldn't get in. So there's some leaps that you have to make in order for this theory or this timeline to make sense. The first leap you have to make is that Chandler knew that password. There's no evidence that he knew that. The second theory that you have to make is that while he's allegedly murdering his parents, he had the wherewithal to go to this computer and put on YouTube or something to keep it going when there's no evidence that that even happened. There was a lot of evidence about cell phone data that were extracted, computer data, all of that, but nothing about Bart's laptop showing that there was YouTube or anything to keep that computer active, because it had to be active. It would shut down or it would log off after 20 minutes of inactivity. The other piece of evidence with this timeline is that you had that neighbor that during their closing, the state said that the neighbor smelled something around 8 to 9 p.m. No, they testified that it was around 7 o'clock that they started smelling something. What we do know is that roughly around 8, around 8:30-ish, maybe a little earlier, look at your notes, Chandler went to Quick Trip to buy some ice. So again, another leap that you're supposed to make is that while he's allegedly murdering his parents, he decides, I'm going to start this fire. I'm going to put some things in that fire, but wait, I have to go to Quick Trip. Use your common sense. That makes sense to absolutely no one. They don't get the benefit of the doubt that I get. So they can't say, well, we might have been wrong about the timeline. They don't get that. What you have is a medical examiner, 2 medical examiners that could not say the time of death. So really, truly, do you know what time these alleged homicides happened? You don't. You know that they happened that day based on other circumstantial evidence that you can put together, but you don't know the exact time. Let's talk about what else you do not know. You do not know what gun was used. They want to make a big deal about this gun. Let's talk about it. You heard from a medical examiner that there was at least 2 to 3 shots of a gun, period. That medical examiner was not able to tell you what kind of gun, wasn't even able to tell you if it was a high-powered rifle, just a gun. She also wasn't able to tell you which wound occurred first. So this contact wound, that could have been the last one. That could have been the first one. You don't know. This gun was not even located until October. These homicides occurred in July. Chandler apparently hid everything. He hid it so well that they didn't find it until October when the owner of that farm was cleaning out. If anything, Dane County deputies did a thorough investigation. They spent at least 3 hours in that barn. I want to tell me they couldn't find a gun, but they were able to find a tarp. What you know from the gun is that there's a bullet casing and a bullet fragment in this basement that match to this gun. You do not know when that casing was there. You don't even know if that bullet fragment and that casing happened at the same time. You don't know that this is a gun that was used on Bart. You don't know that.
That's a bit. How's he get the victim's name wrong?
So whenever you don't know about something, you have to ask yourself, have they met their burden? Is this proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Because you do have examples of what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is. Those maps that we saw yesterday, tracking Chandler's every single move, matching up with where the bodies were found and at the time that they were found, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. A bloody tarp and some tools, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But that doesn't mean that a homicide occurred. It means that something awful happened. And no one's disputing that. No one is saying that nothing happened to Bart and Krista. Something awful happened to these two people. And the very least you can say is that Chandler reacted. But you do not know what happened. And I know some of you have already made up your mind. I see it, and that's fine. Maybe you do think he murdered his parents. The question I have for you is, did the state meet their burden when it comes to first-degree intentional homicide? There are a lot of different homicides. First, second, reckless. They chose first-degree intentional homicide because they believed that they could prove that. I'm asking you that question. What have you been given that proves intent? Some searches after the fact? During closing, they said that the last time that there was any kind of search happened on the 8th. And they believed that he was just deleting his searches every day and he wasn't able to delete his searches on the 8th because he was arrested. There are searches on the 7th. And hey, guess what? There are times when I do not Google something. There are times when you all don't Google something. So he was smart enough to delete his Google history, but he's not smart enough to delete anything else. He's smart enough to do a very good job about cleaning and concealing these homicides. But man, was he just really bad when it came to everything else.
Yeah, especially Snapchatting at the burial site.
You cannot have it both ways. You can't have someone that is so cold and calculated to clean everything up and then say to themselves, I'm going to leave one casing. You just can't have that with everything else that happened after these homicides. It's kind of laughable when you think about it. And you just don't have that with these homicides. Why? Why don't you have that? There was no evidence. There was no testimony at any point saying that Chandler had planned this out. And they would have brought it to you if they had it.
They don't need to.
There's no evidence at all that Chandler is a violent person. And I'm not saying that you need to be a violent person to commit homicides. You know that. But again, intent is something that means something. And there's just no evidence that's providing you with that level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that you need for this first-degree intentional homicide.
You know, it couldn't have been Chandler because he wouldn't have left a bullet casing. No. He wouldn't. So, just because he can't clean up properly, he can't pick up all of his casings, he's innocent.
Do you know how Bart was killed? Exactly how he was killed.
Shot in the back.
Do you know how Krista was killed? Do you know if it was an awful accident? Do you know if it was intentional? Do you know if there was someone else involved? You don't. And that's a problem. Now, for better or for worse, this case has gotten a lot of media attention. And unfortunately, I have to bring it up. You were asked every day whether or not you saw something on the news, whether you heard something on the news. And you were asked that for a reason. You guys have a really bad job coming up. It's difficult. I do not want your job. You have to go back and look at everything and make sure that everything that you're discussing in that room
For a whole 2 hours.
actually came from evidence that you heard from that stand and not from the Google searches that you may or may not have done. I'm hoping you didn't, but I'm going to be realistic. Or the comment section on YouTube. And you're going to have to hold that person accountable, and you're going to have to hold that person accountable because that's your duty.
Yeah, couldn't do the dishes.
You have another very serious duty that's going to be hard for each and every one of you to do. You're going to have to take your emotions out of the equation. There was another promise that was said during the state's opening. They promised you that they were not going to try to tug at your heartstrings and show you pictures that they didn't need to show you.
Really?
When Mitchell testified, do you think he needed a giant blow-up picture of his parents next to him to be reminded what his parents looked like? When Brett testified, do you think it was important for their case to ask him the last conversation he had with his brother? Oh, and it happened to be on his birthday? The birthday being July 1st? No. They didn't do that because they needed it for the case. They did it because they want you to think of your emotions. They want you to feel things. Because when you feel things, it's going to be harder for you to
Because
separate
they lived a fucking
feelings
life.
from facts. And you're going to have to do that. Because you may feel bad. No one here feels great about what happened. And after you make your decision, no one's going to walk out of this courtroom feeling at ease, at peace, happy. But you're going to have to do that. And people are not going to like it, regardless of what the decision is. And you're going to have to hold people accountable for it. Now, I don't get to come back up. When I'm done, the state's going to come up and they're going to do their rebuttal. And they're going to say everything that I said is flawed some way, somehow, or that you shouldn't pay attention to it. And that's fine. That's their job. They have the burden. They have the last say. But when they're talking during their rebuttal, I want you to think of this. What if I told you that at any minute, someone's going to walk into that door, someone from the Dane County Deputy's Department is going to walk in and say, I found it. I found the video we were looking for. I know exactly what happened in that house on the 1st. It doesn't exist. But what if it did? Are you going to be paying attention to, I'm going to assume it's Mr. Brown, or are you going to be paying attention to what Mr. Brown has to say during his rebuttal? Or are you going to be looking at that door hoping that someone walks in? And if you're going to look at that door hoping that someone comes in, you have reasons to doubt.
What the fuck?
There are plenty of reasons to doubt that a first-degree
I've got plenty of reasons to doubt that you've got all your marbles.
There are plenty of reasons to doubt. You may not like that. It may feel like a cop-out. It may feel like I'm just doing something for the
Why
sake
didn't you
of
put on the
coming up here and
defense
talking to you. I'm not. I'm doing my job. I'm making sure that they do their job. And I'm asking you to do your very difficult job of evaluating everything. And from day one, the issue has been the homicides. I want you to spend time on the homicides.
What else
Ask
is
yourself
there?
the questions that you need to ask. I guarantee you that the 12 of you that are going to go back and deliberate are all going to have 12 different theories on what happened. And that's a problem. I'm asking you to find him not guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
I love it, manslaughter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Vera. As counsel indicated, the state carrying the burden of proof has the opportunity for a rebuttal. In other words, the last word, and I believe Attorney Brown will provide that to you at this time.
Thank you. It's a lot of talk in the defense closing and opening about things they learned in law school or going to law school. And I think in the opening, I heard at one point, being on a jury is different than being a person. If any of that's true, but I'm done with law school and I do this for a living. I operate in a world of common sense and not fanciful thoughts of just this guy finding his dead parents and deciding, no big deal, let's just cut them apart and hide them around the state. But who knows how to die? I live in that world. That's the world you should live into. Because being a juror is no different than being a person, unlike maybe what you were told earlier. You're told by the judge, although they figured out a way to say it in about 2 paragraphs, you use your common sense and experience in the roles of everyday life, or something along those lines. A bunch of lawyers got together and thought about it for 2 weeks and figured out a way to say, use your common sense. Miss Vera just stood up here and said, what if this was an awful accident? Bart Halderson was shot in the back.
2 awful
twice.
accidents.
You do not fall down and shoot yourself in the back twice. Bart Halderson and Krista Halderson had their heads chopped off, had their arms and legs removed.
Accidentally, the
That
axe
was an
fell.
awful accident.
Yeah.
Think of for a second. You heard about the bones. You saw those marks on the bones, those attempts.
Yeah.
Some of them 3, some of them 10, some of them 5. False starts is what the anthropologists call them. That is someone on their hands and knees.
Yeah.
Chandler, apparently, which was just saying, I guess we're admitting to that now. They lied and chopped him up and hit him around the state. On his hands and knees, some of them from the front to back, meaning probably could see the face of his mom and his dad as that saw moved back and forth, back and forth. And you just saw the bones, but what's before the bones? The skin, the blood, the muscle, the fat, the smell that they had to produce, the blood of his own parents. An awful accident. We heard, I go days without Googling things. I don't, maybe you do, but I bet you don't Google dismembered body found in Wisconsin when you're crying on the local news about your missing parents.
Or half song to die in cold.
Woman's dismembered body found. I bet you don't do legal research about some other guy who chopped up his family members and threw them in a river.
I do.
Bet you don't do that. This process is common sense. Ms. Vera talked a lot about the lies. Chandler is a liar, and it seems like we all agree on that now. Lots of people lie.
My search of history would probably be pretty bad.
The question in this case is, who would do this? And maybe that's something that's gone through your mind. Who would do this? Who would go through all this? Who would make up all these lies? Who would take it this far? All these fake people, the burner phone, the nonsense, the calls to his dad, the emails back and forth, the friends and family, the move to Florida. Who would do this?
The bullshit.
And you're going to leave this room. 6 of you are going to go home. 12 of you are going to go into a room and talk to each other. And you're never going to have an answer to that question. Because who would do this in the common sense meaning of it? Nobody does something like this. But that's not the role of a jury. You're answering a different question, which is who did this, not who would do this. Because for the life of you, I bet before you got that notice in the mail a couple months ago saying you had to come here, you would say nobody. You would have said nobody. Nobody would shoot their dad in the back twice, kill their mom, lay him on the ground in front of their family fireplace, take scissors, pruning shears, take a hacksaw, take a keyhole saw, and saw off their heads, arms, legs, burn them in the fireplace. Over 100 fragments of human bone found in that fireplace. You'd say no one would do this. But you got your jury summons. You ended up here, and you found out that someone did do it. Chandler Halderson did it. So those lies are important. Because you at some level have to grasp how this man got to that point. As I said in the opening statement, the murders were just a small piece of the puzzle. None of the things that happened before, none of the things that happened after make any sense. You gotta have the murders to understand why he did that bizarre story for 7 days of his parents going missing with the unknown couple. And you can understand the murders if you understand what happened before with his bizarre actions of building up this life. It wasn't real. Why were those lies important? They were important because it's all he had. We're here because of the deaths of Bart and Krista Halderson, and they are dead. There's no doubt about that. You have most decidedly concluded that at this point. You have seen their bodies. But on some level, whoever Chandler Halderson was died years ago as well. And what was left was this shell of a person who made this nonsense up, who built himself up to be a tech employee, rescue scuba diving guy, who's going to college. It was all he had. It was all he had. And that started to unravel. Maybe his parents suspected it. But you listened to Bart Halderson on that call just about a day before he was killed. That sound like someone to you who knew his son had been lying to him? Those text messages. I spoke to Omar Joe. I'm ready whenever you are. He didn't know what was going on until that moment. So when Bart Halderson finds out that this is a lie, to Chandler, whoever Chandler Halderson is, the whole world crumbles. Because if you weren't going to school, they sure weren't going to hire you at American Family Insurance. That couldn't have been real. There's no way you got a job at SpaceX. What else are you lying about? Where are you going all the time when you say you're training for this scuba diving team? Everything about it falls apart. He doesn't have any money. Remember when he texted his girlfriend?
I'll give you a motive. I'll give you an alibi, Jen.
He's going to the police. Hey, can I have $5 for a sandwich? He can't just leave. He can't move out. He can't get in the car and head west. He probably couldn't make it out of the state.
Hello,
if he wanted
Louise
money.
Tresco. What do you mean what actually happened to Mr. Ty Tucker? I actually do know what happened to Mr. Ty Tucker. Why for, you ask?
Money he had because he never had a job. He had two options: own up to his lies, stand up, finally tell the truth for once,
No, it's fine.
or like a coward, shoot your father in the back. And that's exactly what happened.
I will drop his YouTube channel link in chat for you.
That's exactly what happened. Miss Vera says, wow, we just got to showcase it. Yeah, we got a bullet fragment.
Yeah, it's free.
Just happens to have Bart Halderson's DNA on it. And you looked at it, just happens
Sure
to have
is.
blood all over it. And then text my mom. Hey, pick up soda for me. Dad's phone's dead. She gets home. Whose blood spatters on the safe right there by
Have
the
a
door?
look in my playlist
Those little red dots, human blood.
on my channel.
It's Krista Halderson.
It's got the whole thing there.
We don't
But I
know
will
what
put
happened.
his YouTube channel
We know
on
exactly what happened.
the link.
Murders are not captured on video. That's not how this happens. That's how this works. Sure, in the grand scheme of things, there are some people who are stupid enough to walk up to a gas station, stand in front of the security camera, and shoot somebody. But that's not real life. That's not common sense. Chandler Halderson did this in the basement of his house. The blood is everywhere. The bullet's there. You heard from Mr. Leatherberry, who testified, he only found one, and the one he found was kind of rolled behind under that bench. He tried to clean up. Peroxide everywhere. He's having people bring him peroxide. Blood all over that fireplace stoop. Bone fragments in the ash trap. You know exactly what happened. You don't need a video. The lies are important because it's all Chandler Halderson had. And when they were exposed, he started coming up with his plan. And yeah, after the Omar Job text comes in on the 29th, he's having a conversation with his girlfriend. You heard, Miss Vera actually read it, and that's fair. The day before, hey, are we going to the cabin? What's going on? They're talking about the cabin. He's starting to dabble with the idea of what he's doing. And I think it was at 1:04 p.m., just about an hour and a half, 2 hours before he did it. He says they're going to the cabin this weekend. He made his final decision. Because at that moment, Chandler Halderson knew there was no way out. He couldn't get in the car and drive away. He couldn't make up another lie. He couldn't make up another email. He couldn't buy another burner phone. It was done. Everyone was going to see him for what he was. Just some liar. Some guy without a job, not going to school, who'd been lying to everyone for years. And he couldn't handle that. So he committed the ultimate act of betrayal against your parents. Perhaps against any human being, but especially your parents, the person who held you when you were a baby and cleaned up your cuts on your knee when you were learning to ride a bike, comforted you when you were crying.
There you go, my love.
The ultimate act of betrayal. He shot his parents. And then he cut them up and he hid them.
It's got
The
his
lies didn't
email
stop.
on that channel as well.
It was a new one. No, that's the cabin. Now he's on the news. Now he's giving interviews. Given 2-3 more days, don't think for a second there wouldn't have been 2-3 more fake emails. Text messages from my mom. A whole new world. A whole new reality for Chandler that he got to live in. His checklist was right there. Finally, he was going to get a job. Obviously, mom and dad couldn't support him anymore. Maybe he was going to get some life insurance. Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't. But he certainly got to continue on his fake life. He got to keep his girlfriend. People continued to respect him. His friends probably continued to think that he was successful, important. The lies were rinsed and repeated, rinsed and repeated. Now, I promise I'm about done, and I'm the last person who talks. The judge is going to talk a little bit more. What he's going to say next is hard to hear in that he has to read off the verdict forms you're going to take back to the jury room with you. The verdict forms are the physical documents for each charge. There's a bunch of charges here. For each one, there's one that says guilty and not guilty, guilty and not guilty, guilty and not guilty. And he actually read them all. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but he has to do it. But what Ms. Vera is asking you to do is to lie. It is the last lie of Chandler Halderson. His lawyers stood up here and told you to lie for him. Not to do what you swore to do, which is to render a just and true verdict based on the evidence, to reconcile the evidence, if you can find any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, a reasonable hypothesis, that reasonable hypothesis that was just offered to you was that it was an accident. That's how they died. And then Chandler made what his attorney believes to be the reasonable decision to chop apart those bodies and hide them around the state. What you're being asked to do is to lie one.
Yep.
It is the experience that everyone in Chandler Halderson's life has had to deal with.
Axel. Axe.
His girlfriend dealt with it. Sure, Bart and Krista dealt with it.
And yeah.
Finding out maybe on the last
And
day
then
of
tried
their
to
lives.
burn them.
Mitchell is dealing with it. Brett is dealing with it. Their family friends. The Hilgendorfs. Their kids. Haley and Hannah. They've had to deal with it. Mary Sesto had to deal with it. Kevin Linsmeyer, the neighbor, had to deal with it. Then to the police. Deputy Seeley, Deputy Nelson, Deputy Shunk, Deputy Sims,
Yeah.
Deputy Hendrickson, Deputy Collins-LaFleur. Everyone who has interacted with this man for years has had no other experience other than being lied to. And now it's you that's going to be lied to by his attorneys. Asking
Okay,
you,
I'm going to object now.
So was there anything you particularly wanted to know about Ty, Louise? Because he's been out for, what was it, 6 months now, I think. Where is my... Where is it? Well, they didn't get round to the second trial because the prosecutors, Mansfield and I can't remember his name now, actually went to Ty during the night in the prison a few times and concocted a deal with him where he pretty much, they dropped all of the charges except for the burglary, was it, or something like that, and let him go with time served. So he pretty much got everything dropped. They waived all of his fines and court fees, and that's pretty much because Mansfield and Alvarez knew that the Attorney General would not drop the charges, so they went directly to Ty, and I can't remember what the name of the deal was. It was can you remember, Brian? The name of it was like a get out of jail free card, pretty much. It was the closest thing that they could say to him being innocent than them saying that he's innocent, basically. And he got off with time served. No parole, no bond, nothing. He does have a Facebook, yes. He also has a mobile number, which I have. When is that's the first one. No, that's come on. Idiot. Can't remember the name of it. in that one. Let's have a look at this one instead, eh? Yeah, we'll just update.
I walked out of Morgan's courtroom. I went back to the jail. I was like, I'm not an accused murderer anymore.
Yep, that's right.
You know,
Yep.
I'm not trying to hear that bullshit anymore.
Yep, that's right.
You know what I'm saying? I've been the bad guy. I've been painted as the bad guy for 7 years.
Yep.
You know, I don't have that anymore.
So
I can
when
walk down the street and hold my head high.
so when you went back to the jail, Ty, I've always wondered this. So you go back to the jail after this, and you're kind of like back. Obviously, you're still a prisoner at that moment, right? Even though you've already pled out and you're supposed to be released, you're just back in your pod, just waiting. Is everybody congratulating you? Or do they take you to a separate area?
Right, he pleaded no contest, which basically says, if I went to trial again, I realised that you may have enough information on me to put me in jail, but they dropped the charges. Yeah, where's my? It was actually really funny because it's under, I think, Franklin Tyrone Tucker, if I recall, under Facebook. He rang my mobile one night while I was in the middle of midstream. He was whilst he was in Key West still in prison, and I thought it was a spam caller. I didn't answer it. Dickhead. What is it? There we go. Oh, where'd it go? Oh. Use it first. Open. And come on. Hang on. I'm just queuing up. I can't believe I was such a dickhead. Like, what a dickhead. Who does that? Well, I do. Yeah, I do. All right. I'll share this screen. Right, unmute Jody.
But thankfully, he rang back. So we just
Hang on.
have done a quick snippet.
Oops.
Quick snippet. Well, I tried to do a quick.
Hang on.
Hello there. Welcome to the show. Surprise. And I just lost all of my chat again.
Ah, I can see it. That was Jody's way of saying she put the wrong intro on this.
Everything. What the? Anyway, welcome. Surprise.
Oh.
We have a little
Whoops,
tidbit.
sorry. Hang on, I gotta mute you. That's me. All right. Sorry.
I don't know if anyone was watching last night. We were streaming day 4
so
of
funny.
the Laurie Shaver trial, day 4. And we were interrupted suddenly by my mobile phone ringing. I initially discarded as spam and then double checked it and realized that it wasn't spam. It was Ty ringing from
My
Monroe County
microphone
Detention
sounds
Centre.
way better
And
there.
I ignored it. Oops.
I tried to tell her
Yes, she
to
did.
answer it over and over and over.
She did. And because it was 10:30 p.m. my time, I did not put 2 and 2 together. But thankfully, he rang back.
No one rings me at 10:30 at night.
We just have done a quick snippet. Well,
Hey,
I tried to do a quick snippet to detach it from the live stream so that you could watch and listen to our phone call. All right. So enjoy.
I won't play a lot of it because I have a lot of feedback. Because he rings me on my mobile, I've got my microphone going and it just gives feedback. So I'll just play a little bit of it.
Can you hear that?
I can.
My microphone sounds awesome in that.
Well,
and she barely, I mean, like, she broke down and she my Mr. Rogers
Read it. She read the card.
Hello.
You have a call at no expense to you.
Stupid.
The helicopter arrives.
Monroe County Sheriff's Department. To accept this call, press or say 5.
Five.
Call, take out now.
5.
All future calls, press or say.
Panic setting in here. Sarah.
Messing with your mic.
Yeah, no, I can't do it. I need to get that cleaned up. It does get better, I think, later, but
yeah.
Jody, move your phone.
Answering you.
Shit off.
There we go.
Did you get hold of Toto Quinn?
Toto Quinn, I have not been able to get hold of, but I'm also not legally allowed to right now.
They reinstated. He reinstated the gag order, did he?
Well, and technically, I'm not even supposed to reach out to him through my PI. I can reach out to him through my former attorneys, that I can do. But I mean,
I don't know what you're saying to us.
Anyway, that was funny. So, yes. This is his Facebook. Not Facebook. This is his YouTube channel. And yeah, his Facebook's, I'm pretty sure it's Hi Franklin Tucker. Pretty sure. Oh, I better swap that. Franklin Tyrone Tucker, yes. Yes, indeed, it is. And that's his. You see that? That's his profile pic. All right. But yes, he's out. And he's currently trying to organize his YouTube channels, because he's got all of the sidebars from the trial he wants to put up. So yeah, there's a whole in my, if you go into my playlist, there's a whole 71 videos. But yeah, he took a no contest plea, which was pretty much the same as a not guilty plea, which is good. All right, let's finish off this, as this is nearly done.
Every single one of them represents something that happened. And what we're asking you to do is to dig through that evidence, dig through your notes, dig through your memory of what happened. What happened here wasn't an accident. What happened here wasn't a mistake. What happened here wasn't innocence, lies, coincidences. Mr. Halderson's statement to the police that my mom has nosebleeds and my dad, he just scratches his psoriasis. It doesn't explain his blood on a bullet fragment. It doesn't explain all of their blood on the fireplace. It doesn't explain the Haldersons' teeth in the ash trap. It doesn't explain their skull in the ash trap and placed on top of the fireplace. What I'm asking you to do is to look for the truth and not to negotiate. Not take the idea that, well, there's one piece of paper there where he signed a document and says he lied to the cops, and maybe that's good enough. These people were killed. This is a first-degree intentional homicide.
What is it, midday there now, yeah?
This is a first-degree intentional homicide. You cannot shoot someone in the back. You cannot chop them up. You cannot scatter their remains and come to any other conclusion. And there is only one person who did those things here, and that is Chandler Halderson. We're asking you to find him guilty. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. As counsel indicated, I have a little bit more to instruct you, and I do need to review with you the verdict forms. When I'm finished with this, we will draw the 5 names of those individuals who will not be participating in the deliberations.
What about Oregon? Is that's West Coast, isn't
Now,
it?
members of the jury, the duties of counsel and the court have been performed. The case has been argued by counsel. The court has instructed you regarding the rules of law, which should govern you in your deliberations. The time has come when the great burden of reaching a just, fair, and conscientious decision of this case is to be thrown wholly upon you,
He
the
might not be
jurors
up yet.
selected for this important duty. You will not be swayed by sympathy, prejudice, or passion. You will be very careful and deliberate in weighing the evidence. I charge you to keep your duty steadfastly in mind and as upright citizens to render a just and true verdict on all counts. You are to decide only whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of the offenses charged. Any consequences of your verdicts are matters for the court alone to decide and must not affect your deliberations. You will be provided with 16 verdict forms. There are 2 forms for each count, and the count to which they apply is identified on each verdict form at the top.
What do you know?
So I'll show you each of these. As to count 1, there are 2 verdict forms. One reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as to Bart Halderson, as charged in count 1 of the amended information." The second verdict form for count 1 reads almost identically, "We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as to Bart Halderson, as charged in count 1 of the amended information." There's a space for the date of the verdict. There's a space for a signature of the presiding juror. As to each of these 8 counts, only one verdict form should be returned. The other verdict form should be left blank. The presiding juror only should sign and date the verdict that represents the verdict of the jury as to that count. For count 2, one verdict form reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of providing false information about a missing person as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 2 of the amended information." The corresponding verdict form for count 2 reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of providing false information about a missing person as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 2 of the amended information." The 2 verdict forms for count 3. One reading.
You've there's a case coming up in Arizona with Lisa Cunningham from Australia, from Adelaide, coming up, I think, next month.
"We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of mutilating a corpse as to Bart A. Halderson, as
simple,
charged
isn't
in
it?
count
Easy.
3 of the amended information." And the second reading, "We, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of mutilating a corpse as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 3 of the amended information."
I know you guys have probably seen all this, and I'm not going to spoil it for Louise, but did you know that there was alterations to the decision between then and now?
With date and signature lines on both. As to count 4, the 2 verdict forms read, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of hiding a corpse. As to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 4 of the amended information. And the second, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of hiding a corpse. As to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 4 of the information, with a date and signature space on both verdict forms. As to count 5, which is identified again on the verdict forms, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 5 of the amended information, and we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 5 of the amended information, with signature and date lines for both. Count 6, as identified on the verdict forms, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of providing false information about a missing person. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 6 of the amended information and the corresponding form, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of providing false information about a missing person. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 6 of the amended information, with again date and signature spaces on both forms. As to verdict count 7, as identified on the forms, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of mutilating a corpse. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 7 of the amended information, and we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of mutilating a corpse. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 7 of the amended information, again with the signature spaces and dates on each. And finally, the 2 verdict forms as to count 8, as identified on each. We the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson not guilty of hiding a corpse. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 8 of the amended information. And the second, we the jury find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of hiding a corpse. As to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 8 of the amended information. Both of those again with a space for the date and the signature of the presiding juror.
Oh, I've got 7th of July here.
It is for you to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty of each of the offenses charged. You must make a finding as to each count of the amended information. Each count charges a separate crime, and you must consider each one separately. Your verdict for the crime charged in one count must not affect your verdict on any other count. This is a criminal, not a civil case. Therefore, before a jury may return verdicts which may legally be received, the verdicts must be reached unanimously. In a criminal case, all 12 jurors must agree in order to arrive at a verdict.
Take that off first.
When you retire to the jury room, select one of your members to preside over your deliberations. The presiding juror's vote is entitled to no greater weight than the vote of any other juror. If you need to communicate with the court while you are deliberating, send a note through the bailiff signed by the presiding juror. To have a complete record of this trial, it is important that you communicate with the court only by a written note. If you have questions, court will talk with the attorneys before answering, so it may take some time. You should continue deliberations while you wait for an answer. The court will answer any questions in writing or orally back here in open court. When you have agreed upon your verdicts, have each one signed and dated by the person you've selected to preside. After you've reached verdicts on all, all 8 counts, the presiding juror should notify the bailiff that the verdicts have been reached. We will assemble everyone back into the courtroom and the jury will enter the courtroom. The verdict forms, as well as my instructions, will be within this folder. And obviously, the presiding juror should carry the folder into the courtroom when you return to the courtroom. That will clue me into which one of you has been selected as the presiding juror. I will then, once we've assembled and gone back on the record, ask the presiding juror if the jury has indeed reached verdicts on all 8 counts. Assuming the answer is yes, I will ask the presiding juror to give the folder to Randy, and he will provide it to me. Unlike on TV or sometimes on movies, jurors or the presiding juror does not read the verdicts.
I can't remember what we were talking about, Jenny. I've slept since then. What trial were we talking about? In Florida? Was it one I had on? Oh, you mean the Border Patrol one? Well, I've just had a look at the docket. And there is 4 massive trials coming this month. Massive. We've got, there's one, Jason Moan. Then we have Stephen Stearns, Matthew Farwell, and Brian Koberger. So, one can only spread oneself so thin. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the what do you call it? The Border Patrol guy, I can never say his name. Burros Alvarez. Matthew Moore. I've heard of that one. I've had to tell you for that case. Yeah, well, what I was thinking I might do, because I watched I wasn't streaming when the Idaho case was on. I was actually watching it on RA. Let me get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. Yeah, I was actually watching it develop when it actually happened and was so into it. But then when they started all the motions and all the bullshit, I've sort of dropped off against. But what I wouldn't mind doing, I was just talking to Teresia, I'd actually like to sit and watch that trial with you guys, which we now can do on Discord, and watch it all together without having to report on it. And then I can cover a different trial. I can do Farwell or Stearns, but they're all this bloody month. I should see if Tanya will do one of them. That would be good. But then there's only so many hours in a day. So I don't know. I'm still tossing up. Because for me to go up and do lives with the big cases against the big content creators, my algorithm gets pushed to the bottom because of the competition. If I'm trying to compete on that scale, on that time frame, it's not worth it for me to do. Like, I got $90. I got paid $90 for covering Karen Reid case from start to finish, pretty much. So I would have rather have watched it with you and covered another trial from would have covered Matthew Moore. So and I think what I might do when it's the live ones as well, try and do it more on the recap. So I watch it during the day and then I present it so that it's not 8 hours of me sitting in the one position. Because, doing 8 hours a night for, 8 weeks, it ain't easy. Because it's 9 o'clock your time is 11 p.m. my time. So my day starts at 11 p.m. It's now 2:13. So this is early. So yeah, I might. 7 Cents first trial is going to be. Oh, I don't know. It's on the gavel because he's getting done for the two different things, isn't it? It's getting done for the SA stuff and then the unaliving are separate, I think, if I remember. Yeah. Oh no, there's not too many of them, but there's like they've earned their spot. They've earned their prize. You know what I mean? They deserve. I don't begrudge them at all. I've only been here 12 months, so the issue is that if you're putting me up against someone who's got 400,000 subscribers, I'm going to be way down the pecking order, and I'll get 2 or 3 views, and for 8 hours work, it's I'd rather do it as a recap. Get the good stuff, cut all the shit out, the bullshit out. No lunch breaks, no sidebars, no nothing, and present it the next day succinctly. That makes sense. You don't reckon? Do you reckon it'll be sealed? Well, he's supposed to start. When did I say, Tracia? There's this one that starts. Where is that? He's called Justin Mohn, Mohn, and he's charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and possible something. I can't read it. And that's supposed to be going to trial, I think, this week or next week. Then we've got Stephen Stearns. He's got 3 case numbers. Yes, the sexual battery one. Then there's the first degree capital. Oh, no, I've cut off the rest of it. I can't see it. And then we've got Coburger on the 30th of July. And Farwell, 4th of August. And Coburger will be probably as big, or if not as long as, or longer than Karen Reid. It's going to be massive. Massive. Because there's 4 victims. So, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. There's too many trials. It's only one me. Yeah, well, 3 case numbers. There might be like a sub number or something like that. Right, so Chandler, Mr. Chandler, the case has rested. The jury deliberates, and we will go to the verdict. Shall we? Ready, steady, go. Share this tab instead. Oh, my God. Come on. Open wide. There you go. Sound.
No.
Okay. It's not me, it's the courtroom. Now the audio will come on.
We're back on the record, and the appearances are as they were previously. Is there anything from the state before we have the jury join us?
No.
3 case numbers, that's all.
No.
Randy, if you would.
There might be like a sub number under one of them. What's this one? Oh. Come on. How long did the jury deliberate on this one, Tricia? it's bizarre seeing everyone in masks again.
Please be seated.
2 hours they deliberated.
Juror number 6, by all indications, you would be the foreperson. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Sir, did the jury reach a verdict on all counts in this matter? Could you please give Randy the folder?
I actually listened to the judge after he reads the verdict, and he just, I wish they could all be like him. Stephen Stearns would definitely be streamed, yes, definitely. 100%.
The verdict form on count 1, as signed by the presiding juror and dated today, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 1 of the amended information. As to the verdict form for count 2, as signed and dated, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of providing false information about a missing person as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 2 of the amended information. Verdict form for count 3, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of mutilating a corpse as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 3 of the amended information.
Yeah.
Verdict form for count 4, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of hiding a corpse as to Bart A. Halderson, as charged in count 4 of the amended information. The verdict form for count 5, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 5 of the amended information. The verdict form for count 6, as signed and dated by the foreperson, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of providing false information about a missing person as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 6 of the amended information. The verdict form as to count 7, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of mutilating a corpse as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 7 of the amended information. And finally, the verdict form for count 8, as signed and dated, reads, we, the jury, find the defendant Chandler M. Halderson guilty of hiding a corpse as to Krista R. Halderson, as charged in count 8 of the amended information. I will note for the record that the jury also returned the 8 verdict forms that read not guilty, and that those do not bear any signature or date, as well as returning the jury instructions. Let me inquire of you, and I'll use initials. Ms. B, are the verdicts which I read the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes. Mr. Daringer, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes. Mr. H, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Yes, they are. Mr. M, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? I do not need to ask the foreperson, as his signature appeared on the verdicts. Ms. C, are those the, Mr. C, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Ms. W, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Mr. M, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Mr. H, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Mr. A, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Mr. J, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? And finally, Mr. B, are those the verdicts with which you agreed? Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, you have finished your service here as the jury in this case. I have to tell you that words are difficult to come with to express the gratitude that I feel, and that I believe those people within the criminal justice system which we serve feel, regarding the time and concentration and sacrifices which you gave for this process. It's not just the days that we were here in court. Unusually in this case, we spent a number of days away from here, and yet you still followed your oath, the directions I gave you, and you were committed wholly and wholeheartedly to this process, and I thank you. I'll be happy to meet with you after I'm finished here in the courtroom if you wish to stay, and please go with our thanks and gratitude. Randy?
All right, for the jury.
There you go. Sentencing.
A Dane County man convicted of killing and dismembering his parents will spend the rest of his life in prison.
Chandler Halderson was
sorry.
Convicted of killing Bart and Krista Halderson back in January. Halderson had initially reported his parents missing last summer, but he was later arrested for lying to police about their whereabouts. Investigators eventually found the Haldersons' remains scattered around Dane County. The trial had 8 days of witnesses and included testimonies from neighbors, family friends, and Chandler's own brother.
The Dane County judge says life in prison is the only way to protect people from Chandler Halderson.
A jury convicted Halderson of killing and dismembering his parents, as we mentioned last summer. His life sentence also comes without the possibility of parole. Our Brady Mallory takes us to the courtroom now to show us the words the judge had for the 24-year-old. Brady?
Well, this is only the third time Judge John Hyland has handed down
Yeah,
a
I
life
just had a
sentence
look
without
straight up.
parole. Judge Hyland calls this case tragic and says people who knew Bart and Krista Halderson may never heal from this. During today's hearing, the assistant DA said Chandler Halderson grew up very privileged and had parents who provided him an ideal childhood. Now, in a statement, the assistant DA read to the courtroom, Halderson's brother's fiance touched on what the loss means to her.
They will never get to see their son get married or start a family. Mitchell and I will miss them terribly during these milestones.
Halderson has 20 days to appeal. Well, we are continuing our team coverage. Tahalil Mohideen joins us with reaction to today's sentence. Tahalil.
It was an emotional day for the friends and close neighbors of the Halderson family. Many of them cried during the 90-minute sentencing, but emotions weren't just limited to the gallery. ADA Andrea Raymond got emotional in reading several victim impact statements. She told the judge she came to learn just how loved Bart and Krista were.
The one from Cat was heartbreaking.
Across your victims, however they are. But really, it was hard to find anyone who could say anything negative about them. And that's really amazing.
Krista Halderson's oldest friend was also in the courtroom. She handed out yellow roses in memory of Bart and Krista. That friend nodded along as prosecution listed their reasons why Chandler Halderson should not be allowed the possibility of parole. Now, Chandler Halderson's brother Mitchell was not in the courtroom, but he and his fiance did submit victim impact statements as well.
All right, Tahlil, thank you. Of course, we've been covering
Good
this
answer,
story since
Jenny.
Bart and Krista Halderson were first reported missing last July.
Our digital content manager, James Langer, has been recapping this case every step of the way and joins us again now. Hi, James.
Hi.
So what factors went into the judge's decision here today?
Okay. Yeah. No more. Now, did you know there has been an update since this? Anyone? No. Dust. There is. He has had 2 convictions vacated.
A Dane County judge vacated 2 convictions against Chandler Halderson during a hearing today. A jury found Halderson guilty of 8 counts in January of last year for killing his parents, Bart and Krista Halderson, in July of 2021. Among those charges were 2 counts each of mutilating and hiding a corpse. At today's hearing, Judge John Hyland vacated those 2 convictions, saying the jury should not have had the option of convicting Halderson on both charges.
Obviously, the main counts are still in place, and Chandler wants to appeal that, and we'll be working on that appeal in the future. But we're very happy today that counts 4 and counts 8 were dismissed.
Judge Hyland says he wanted to address the issue in Halderson's case now, since it was not raised during the initial trial. Halderson was sentenced in March of last year to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
There you go, folks.
HDMI.
The end. So, look, I don't even know what to do on Monday. There's too many options. Far too many. So, that one that I put up first, where is it? let me show you. I think that first one I gave you, Tricia, was starting Monday, I think. Oh, what's that? Justin Moen. Let me bring up his thing in here. July 7th. Okay, it starts then. And then July 8th is that Lisa Cunningham. Really? Fuck, it is. Oh, we're just going to have to follow that one. Sorry. She's the Aussie. Hang on a second. 8th of the 7th. Evidentiary hearing. But trial 7th of the 7th? How does that work? That makes no sense. I'll put this up so you can have a look. Where is it? My window. There. Okay. And add to stage. So this is Lisa Cunningham here. And her husband is Jermaine. He's also on trial. But it says 6-4, complex capital case, 6:30, pre-trial conference, 7-7, trial. And then down here, it's now saying 7-8, evidentiary hearing. The fuck? Where is the documents? March. Oh, I've got them already. No, I don't. Cancel. What's that? What am I missing? Let me go back up. No drugs, no alcohol, and no killing for 10 years. Maybe they'd still let you use sassafras. What? What's sassafras? Give us the options. I don't know the options. I can't decide. And then see things like that happen. You plan a date, you've given a date, and then you get there and it all turns to shit. I've got 2 presentations that I'm doing because they never made it. One happened during Karen Reid, so that just didn't make it to the screen. And the other one took a plea deal. But there's still a good story worth telling because, yeah. So that's what I'm working on. But I don't understand when this is actually going to trial. I don't effing know. So that's her. That's July 8th. July 7th was that. This guy's he's been charged with unaliving his father, I think it was, and doing it Well, Henry VIII style, off with his head. Yeah. So that looks like it's on Fox 29, not even on the big channels. Oh, Law and Crime might cover it. So that's starting 7th. That's still a week away. Either that, or we can maybe even start catching up and rehashing, going over the Koberger case and refreshing our recollections. These two are the ones I'm doing over the weekend. Yeah. Uzziah Harris on the 20th. Oh, he had some. I forgot all this one too. I've got Kelly Bryant stuff. That was horrible. I don't know. I will have a sleep on it and make a decision tomorrow. Nothing can be rushed at 3 o'clock in the morning. That starts 7th, and we can watch Maxwell Anderson's a fill-in. Oh, yeah. I'll have a look at him tomorrow. Look, we'll find something. There is not like there is a shortage of fucking criminals out there, is there? That's for sure. All right. I'm going to wind it up, my darlings, because I need to go to bed. Funnily enough. Yeah, send me the links in Discord under the channel where it says members suggestions. Chuck them in there, and I'll chuck the link in, and I'll have a look tomorrow when I'm more awake. No, there's not a shortage of anything. Mine is there. All right, my lovelies. Well, you stay cool, stay hydrated, stay safe and well. And if you can't be good at it. Speak to you soon. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Hey there, thanks for stopping in. We hope you will join us again. We all look forward to next time. We get to talk about true crime. Clues. Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule and the defense rests. Our true crime family is great. All types of topics we debate. Smash that like and ring that bell. Hit subscribe, you might as well.